health and a little wealth and a lot of love.
Have his mind and money matters. Cue music.
Mind and money matters. In this segment, we'll be exploring psychological aspects
of financial and health choices.
So we'll look at the other side of things, or look more. This isn't a wealth episode, but we'll still we'll talk about the impacts of obesity on our economy. There are some financial implications of obesity, and some of those are, you can consider, I guess, a population issue and a personal issue too. So you have the individual person. If you have obesity with metabolic syndrome and those associated chronic conditions.
What is metabolic syndrome, just in case?
Metabolic syndrome.
Metabolic, okay.
Metabolic.
I have an issue.
That's okay.
I went to speech therapy when I was younger, and I get tongue-tied on things like specification. I can't even still do it.
Okay.
And metabolic syndrome. Okay, I did it that time. I get like that. I've always been that way.
I stutter too, especially when I get excited.
Yeah, I stutter now.
Stutter.
Yeah.
So metabolic syndrome is a term that we use to describe, there are certain parameters, there are certain criteria, and it usually goes hand in hand with obesity, not always, but it usually shows an impact on your blood glucose and insulin sensitivity, certain cholesterol parameters.
Got it. Say less.
So it's kind of the all-encompassing term of more of the chronic conditions that are related to obesity.
Got it.
So from an individual standpoint, you've got your direct healthcare expenses, your doctor visits, the medication costs, all the medications that you're on. Most people who are, I won't say most people who are obese, but those that have complications from obesity, that have a lot of chronic conditions, they're more likely to end up hospitalized. And then you've got the hospitalization costs. And those are the direct costs to yourself, and sometimes to insurance companies and to the government if you have if you have Medicaid or Medicare. But the other costs that people might not think of are things that we call absenteeism and presenteeism. So absenteeism is basically the amount of time that you're out of work because of these health complications related to obesity. So people who are in that obese category are more likely to have work absences. And then there's presenteeism. And
is that based upon like statistics?
Mm-hmm. And then presenteeism is more the people who have the conditions related to obesity are less efficient at work. And so they might move slower if they have arthritis related to obesity, especially if it's a physically demanding job. And so there are a lot of things that are kind of all-encompassing in that. And I think one of the most recent statistics show that the economic impact on from obesity right now is over $1.3 trillion in the U.S., which is a huge number.
Yeah, it's a huge number. So you're saying the economic impact of obesity in America right now is 1.3 trillion. It's costing us that much money for people who have or overweight or obese.
And it's a generalization, but the health conditions that we see more related to obesity, yes, it's causing a huge economic impact.
Okay. I did not know it was 1.3 or 1.4 trillion. Okay. Well, do you think, based upon your Mind and Money Matters, do you think people should be blamed for their financial burden that they may or may not be putting on that 1.3 trillion, $1.4 trillion? Do you think people should be blamed for that?
No, I don't think that the individual should be blamed. I think we need to move away from that mindset that I know a lot of people say, well, they made this choice, they made this decision, they should have to pay for it, whether it's through life insurance policies or insurance premiums.
Could you imagine that? Yeah, you're obese, so, and by the way, guys, I'm technically obese. Like, I'm morbidly obese, because I do this screening every single time. I know obese is like, or my BMI is high or whatever. And so I'm in this category, so I can speak to it, even though I don't necessarily look like that. That's what people have told me. You're not obese. Well, according to the records, according to my tests I do every year, biometric screening, I am morbidly obese. And then I get a call from my company-sponsored health plan. And they're like, well, have you lost weight? Are you exercising? Well, I exercise 5-6 times a week. I'm very, very fit. I'm digressing, but it's important because I'm in this category now.
And that's the other thing to consider too, is that you can't just go based on someone's number. It's a screening tool to see if we need to look a little bit further to see if there are other signs of metabolic syndrome, if it's having health implications. But there are plenty of people who have a BMI of 30 or above that are perfectly healthy. Muscle weighs more than fat. You know, your height, it's really just an equation that deals with your height and your weight. And so if you have a lot of muscle mass, then you're more likely to have a higher BMI.
Right.
So you can't really just go based on that parameter. But my main point for this is that this is a systemic issue. It's not an individual issue. We don't live in a silo where everybody has access to all the same things,
Right.
whether it's all the same food, all the same education. And a lot of us have thought that we can rely on our government to protect us when it comes to food and only provide food that is safe for us to eat. And I think we're seeing more and more that the food that's available to us is not necessarily safe anymore. This ultra processed food.
I was going to say, like, I get really excited. Finish your thought. Sorry. Go ahead.
We've talked about this in prior episodes, but the ultra processed foods, the chemicals that are in food, the simple sugars, the additives, the pesticides, this is what is contributing to our obesity pandemic, our obesity problem.
I agree with that. And I think, like, what's allowed in America is not allowed in some other countries.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, if you look at like America and other countries, like other countries are like, no. Like just because it's FDA approved does not necessarily mean. I think there's some political power there, which we might delve into another episode. That actually would be a good episode.
Yeah.
If you guys are interested, let us know. Drop us a line. There's a question mark in our website. Ask the question. If you want us to do an episode on that, we will. We will.
It's a vicious cycle too, because a lot of these foods are engineered to be highly palatable and addictive. And so once you start that cycle, it's really hard to break because you're addicted to that ultra processed food.
Right.
And then that's all you want to eat. And it's always higher in calories and inflammatory. And it's not going to improve. Our problem isn't going to improve until we get to more of a bottom-up or approach where we deal with the government. We deal with
I think there's a lot of lobbyists going on. I think there's a lot of like corn syrup, corn starch, all that. I think it's all played into the hands there, so that way people can make more and more money. So if you're addicted to something, eat more of it. They make more money, right?
You think about physical activity too. The budget cuts with the physical education system. So less PE classes, and we're just sitting down and sedentary all day. And it's starting with our kids.
It is.
And the school lunches that they provide.
Right. Oh.
With a little health and a little wealth and a lot of love, that's a life that we live. Susan Scruggs.